I'm down in Margate with the task force to find out what really happens when a young person is being trapped, but to look at it from the different side of the fence, because we're often looking at it from parents worried about our children. So today I thought I'd come down to Margate, where there is a massive problem down there, which is very similar to the problem in London, but it's escalating at a different level down there because children are being sent from London up to places like Margate to traffic drugs. So I thought I'd come and speak to a police officer and find out exactly the process behind how these young children or young people are being finessed into selling drugs, and in fact how they're being moved out and up and down the country. So I thought I'd come down and speak to you about it to get a clearer picture, maybe help save a life, or maybe give a parent information, valuable information they need to help their children. So how does this thing take place?
Yeah, I think the important message to get across is gangs have become a lot more sophisticated in the last few years. So, for example, they will target vulnerability. They will come down from, say, London, and they will hang outside chemists looking at people picking up their methadone, outside places where you pick up your benefits or you receive drug treatment, outside schools, outside children's homes, and they will look for that vulnerability. And then what they start to do over time is start to complete their lists of vulnerable, particularly vulnerable adults and young people. And they come down in a team, and they will exploit that vulnerability. One example of that would be what we call clean skins. That's a young person with no criminal background at all, and their only vulnerability would be something like bereavement in the family, or parents or carers are arguing. But what you'll find is gangs will sometimes have people in the school of the same age that we call peer groomers, who will look for that vulnerability, and they'll befriend them and say, look, I understand how you're feeling, you've had a death in the family, have some freebie cannabis, that'll make you feel much better. And they allow that to happen 5 or 6 times, and then 7th, 8th time they suddenly turn around, says, my boss outside now wants 120 quid plus interest. If you don't pay it, I'm going to send someone down to stab you, your little sister, your little brother, your mum, dad, carer. It's a very powerful process of grooming, and you can argue they haven't got much choice.
So they're actually put in a position where, like you said, they don't have a choice whether or not they accrue this debt or not. They're just given this debt by what and this is the important thing, this is what I want parents to listen to. You spoke about them being groomed in schools.
Yeah.
This is what I just go over that one more time, because this is so important, that children are being groomed in a school environment.
Yeah, so what you've got is some young people in a school who may be connected to gangs, and they will be directed by the elder gang member to look for vulnerability. And one of those examples is a clean skin. And they will go through a process of befriending them, saying they understand how they feel, and then they offer them this gift. That gift could easily be food or other kinds of drugs, but mainly it's high-strength cannabis. And they allow that to happen for a period of time, and the whole point of that is to suddenly confront that young person with a big debt that they have no way of paying off. So that's why we say they haven't really got much choice in being part of that gang, and that process can be really slick. It can occur going from clean skin to dealing on behalf of the gangs in a 12-week period, and that's what I mean by the sophistication of gangs now.
So in a 12-week period, a child, a seemingly normal child, could go from being a normal child at school to somebody who is selling drugs on the streets.
Yes.
Because of a debt that they've accrued, because they were finessed into believing that somebody cared about them, etc., etc. That's how sophisticated it is.
Yeah, and it all becomes about coercion and control once they've established the debt. And I think it's during that period of grooming that the most important thing that we're doing is keying into the schools, engaging with young people and saying, this is the grooming process, please be alert to it and respond to it and offer support as peers to other people your same age to try and protect them from that. And all I've got locally when we go into the schools is a really resounding response to saying, we want to do something about this. And this input we've got has really helped us in understanding in supporting our friends that we do see as vulnerable. And what you do find is many of the young people are aware of some of these tactics. So we learn as much from them as we give ourselves in terms of knowledge.
Because there's a lot of fear amongst young people, and this is one of the things we discussed when we had that wonderful presentation, is that young people know when somebody is being enlisted in a gang, but they're scared to help. Is that how's that? Are they just scared of authority? Are they just scared of the gangs and repercussions?
I think the reality is there's some recent research that has kind of labelled young people in that situation as passive observers, and what's happening is they're seeing it happening, but they don't feel that they've got the skills to intervene, to support, to disrupt that grooming process happening. So for us, the key to that is really helping them in school inputs to role play those scenarios and start developing the skills to support others of their own age and intervene at the right time.
That's amazing. One of the alarming things that jumped out when we had our talk this morning was how young people see risk. That jumps straight out at me. That most young people in that survey. Can we just talk about risk for a second? I think that's really important to talk about risk, how young people see risk.
Yeah, it's something that's really surprised me in terms of what young people see as low risk. So the example is we go into schools and we do a program called Saying No to Drugs and Violence, and we talk to them about how gangs recruit them, but then we talk to them about what they see as low risk and high risk behaviour. And what we're seeing is a trend where young people see high risk as talking to a police officer, but the low risk things are carrying a knife, taking free cannabis from a stranger, taking alcohol from a stranger, and just accepting gifts in general is seen as a low risk behaviour. But then what we say to young people is those low risk behaviours are the very behaviours that the gangs use to groom you with. So we turn that on its head. But that is surprising, and I'm not too sure what's happening there in terms of what you would think would be common sense is high risk, they perceive as low risk. So that's why we put so much effort into getting upstream and getting into the schools and helping these young people have the skills to help each other.
So, I mean, this is all really interesting stuff, and I know that a lot of parents will be listening to this and saying that their child will never be involved in that lifestyle. I think it's a thing that, you know, we all try and know our children, but we can only know them so much. I was alarmed when I heard at the level of it happening in schools, and so I as a parent, would be surprised if one of my children were being groomed in a school environment. So this is really sort of as an informative point for parents, and I think they should take note of this, is that it does happen at a level where you have no control, because it's done at a level where they're out of the house, they're in an environment where they're supposed to be safe, and yet you have peer groomers within the school environment. So if you have something that you would say to a parent who is concerned about their child, what would that be? If you could send a message to a parent that was concerned about their child?
I think it's taking note of videos like this where we're trying to raise awareness of how the gangs recruit. So for parents, what I would be saying to them is look for those really early signs. That may be a change in behaviour when they're given high strength cannabis. That can alter their moods, so you might see a distinct change in mood. You could see a distinct change in clothing where they're wearing designer stuff, or they've suddenly got money. What we do find is if someone's suddenly confronted, a young person's confronted with a drug debt, that can manifest in the home as verbal abuse towards parents, grandparents, siblings, a sudden change in behaviour, or suddenly stealing something in the home. So it's looking for those little signs, but the moment you identify those signs, it's engaging with the school welfare officer and talking that through, or talking to the likes of ourselves, and we can offer the appropriate advice. There's some great advisory documents on the internet around parenting advice, and just type in parent advice for young people affected by gangs, and you can find that. There's quite a bit available on the internet.
Oh, excellent. And just finally, I just want to touch on a subject really quickly. This is another point, was the use of children up and down the country. You know, children are now not just situated and selling drugs where they live. They're being placed in towns like this, up in Margate, and they actually live in areas like Tottenham or Haringey, and they're ending up in Margate. How does that happen very quickly? How does that work?
I think that's very much a product of really a sophisticated way of grooming. What you will find is that the gangs will, in a really fine way, hone into vulnerability. And I think a bit of advice for parents as well is to, if their children start climbing out of the bedroom window at night, in the early stages, that's the point to try and get the support for that young person, because what may be happening, it's not always the case, but what may be happening is that they will be linking up with gang members who will be taking them off somewhere to deal drugs on their behalf. And the reality is, the gang members that are arranging that are taking none of the risk. All of the risk falls with that young person. They're fronting really high risk there. So if they get caught, they get prosecuted for drug dealing, or if they lose those drugs, they will get attacked because they incurred a debt with the gang.
Stories of that.
So one of the biggest challenges for us, I think, in the coming years is working much better together in an integrated way, but not just locally, but working more closely with our London partners and with other seaside towns. Because what we're finding is there is a potential patterning around children being taken to other seaside towns or up to London, and vice versa, other seaside town and London's children being brought down to us and trafficked to deal drugs. So that is a really big challenge, but I think that internal trafficking reflects the sophistication of gangs as they operate now, and it's our responsibility to actually work joined up and counter that risk.
I'm just truly astounded at the sophistication. First of all, I've learned so much today, and I'm really hoping that as a parent or as a youth worker out there, you'll be able to take some value from this, or show it in a school somewhere, because this type of information needs to be spread to young people. It needs to get to young people. Young people need to understand that they could be, in fact, being groomed. So it's not necessarily about having those cool friends, it's about having the right friends, and it's not about having those things that you're going to have to be in debt for, because that's another worrying thing, and that's really alarming for me as well. I'm going to be talking a lot about children in debts, and so yes, so do use this as an informational tool, do share it, do put it on a platform somewhere, and hopefully we can start saving these young people.
Yeah, and I think it's about all of us working together. So it's about the agencies working in an integrated way, us working with the schools and listening to the children's voice, but also it's as much about the community saying, no, we're going to do something really positive about this. And it's about the agencies, about the schools, young people with a voice, and the communities really responding to this. And you know, we can do it, and set that bar high. That bar has to be as high as what do we do for our own young son and daughter, and we must have that ethos, all of us, and it's all doable.
Thank you so much.